Hey everyone, welcome back to FF Squared. You got the Drew Patel here and our co-host Jesse.
How y'all doing?
Today we are welcoming Ty House to our podcast. Ty, introduce yourself.
Thanks for having me, guys. Yeah, I mean, we met each other through a league that I started. You joined a league. I'm not exactly sure how you wound up there, but I mean, all good so far. Your guy, you're making a lot of moves during the draft. I like to see that. I like the activity. And I think we clicked up a little bit just with how we kind of approach things in there. And hey, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I forget what league it was. I'm like drafting two leagues right now, and then I think I'm at 50 leagues this year. So I definitely don't even remember what league it was at this point.
I try to pace myself with how many leagues I add, but I like to add variety. That's always my thing. Like every year, if I'm going to do a new startup, I want to do something that's not exactly like all my other leagues that I'm in.
Yeah, that's 100%. Like if I'm doing redraft leagues, I want something completely different. So it would be like a vampire or a guillotine or like one of those leagues where it's just kind of pushing me out of my comfort zone. Yeah. It's always fun to do those.
Absolutely.
So Ty, how long have you been playing fantasy football?
I've been playing fantasy for over 20 years. A little newer to Dynasty, going on year 4 playing Dynasty now. So there's a little adjustment, but I feel like each year I've been making some pretty big leaps, getting a feel overall and kind of, losing that redraft hat when it comes to draft time. First time around, and the first time in a startup, you just want to win now, and you don't think about the future. I was throwing away rookie picks like they were nothing, and I definitely didn't make that mistake again the second, third, fourth time around. So, it's fun. I've been playing fantasy, been a football fan forever, but just getting I'll say my feet are wet in Dynasty, but I'm not necessarily a seasoned vet like some other people out there in the Twitter world and that.
Yeah, there's guys that are in like 50 to 100 leagues. I'm like, that's
a little
insane.
too much. I like to have a hands-on approach, and you just can't do that with that many leagues.
Yeah, it's tough. How many leagues are you in right
now? Dynasty, just 4. And the one Prue actually joined is my first best ball Dynasty league, which I think now as I add more, and I might do another startup this offseason. We'll see. But I think I want to just add more best ball leagues if I'm going to continue to, take a portfolio approach, as they say. But, because like I said, I like to have my hands on and, combing through waivers, making moves, tweaking lineups, and you just can't do that once you're beyond a certain level. I still have the old redraft leagues that I do with people that I've been doing for years, a couple of keepers. I run a guillotine league myself. Commish now, at least co-commish 5 different leagues. So it gets to be a lot of work.
Yeah, that's a thankless job for sure, being a commissioner. But they make all the difference in the world. Good commissioners do.
Yep,
definitely. I try to be hands-on, try to keep the league active by increasing my own activity,
Yep, and I think the Dynasty League that we're in, the best ball, I think you identified that. I think I had gone 0 RB, and I think we got to talking about David Montgomery and Devin Singletary, and that's sort of where this topic for today came up was players we think that are going to rise in ADP based on what we saw in that best ball draft. And the conversations Ty and I had. So that's the topic for today is ADP risers, and I think we've got 5 players plus a bonus pick by Jesse on some risers. So let's dive in. All right. So Ty, first on board was Joe Mixon.
The first guy I picked, Joe Mixon, and this is really just narrative based. Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, off season there, you heard for months, so he's going to get cut, he's going to get suspended, and it's not looking like either one of those things are going to happen. He's going to be the bell cow for Cincinnati again this year. So that uncertainty seems to be fading. And then there's just the value cycle of dynasty. As when we're drafting in April and May, everyone is more zoomed out. You're looking at the big picture. You want to build a team that's good for years down the road. Well, as you draft closer to the season, people are thinking more about filling out their lineups. Some of that redraft mindset does creep in there. And I mean, I could have picked 5 other running backs for this to make the same point, but I thought Mixon was a good one. There's a couple of guys I see in ADP ahead of him now who I just think come August, people are going to want that volume, and Mixon's going to be one of the guys definitely rising.
Yeah, and I think you're correct. As we get closer to the start of the seasons, I think the undervalued running backs right now are going to go up in ADP. And I think you hit the nail on the head, right? It's early on, and we're all in the dynasty mindset, and we're going with those young wide receivers.
Yep.
And then you see these running backs kind of fall and become value picks.
Especially the veterans.
Yeah, it's weird looking at it from just best ball this year. You see the running backs are seriously devalued. You got guys like, for instance, Cam Akers is going round 7. If this was last year, he'd be like a round 3 pick. And you see how that's kind of infiltrated, particularly dynasty. I was in a dynasty startup, and Aaron Jones is in 12th round, and nobody's touching him until 12th round, right?
He might be the best value for a win now team in drafts,
right? Yeah. And this is where the league where guys seriously devalue older veterans. So you see all these old guys just like Dalvin Cook, he's pushing that LA, right? All these guys who are going to produce and be impact players, but it's a super short window where it's 1 or 2 years maybe. Exactly. And just guys don't want to touch them. So it's okay, I'll scoop them up in round 12. I'm happy to take that value.
Yeah, that's what Prue did in that draft. He went hammered wide receivers early, and it's best ball, so you're not setting a lineup, and just scooped up some productive veterans late, and it's got a pretty good squad. I'll give him a nod there.
Yeah, thanks. I think that was my favorite team I've drafted in the last few years. I traded up to the 109. I already had the 12 and 2-1. So then I hammered away 3 wide receivers in Jamar Chase, AJ Brown, and CeeDee Lamb. And I was so ecstatic to start off that way. And then I knew for a fact that it being a super flex, I would have to go 0 RB. Luckily, I think I had 3 back-to-back picks in the 8th round. Mm-hmm. And I just hammered at running back in the 8th round. So I'm hoping that's, a championship roster there.
Yep. We'll see. We'll see about that.
I don't know. Everyone's coming after my wide receivers. I think I have on my bench Jordan Addison and Deontay Johnson.
Yeah, you're deep for sure.
Right. So that'll be interesting. I think that was the first 0 RB one I've done this summer.
It's fun, man. 0 RB is fun. I know people are especially going from redraft into dynasty, people
it's misunderstood.
They don't fully understand what 0 RB is because they're I didn't draft a running back for 3 rounds. It's no, you got to push that way further back.
Not even close.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's move on to our next guy, Sam Howell.
Well, here is another guy who I think has been held down. Well, we know obviously he didn't have the draft capital last year, but there's been uncertainty. It seems like the public isn't willing to accept what the coaches are saying, that he will be the starter this year. And there's always a risk, Rivera trying to win games and panics and puts in Brissett. But, he's going to come out of the gate as the starter. He's a mobile guy who runs and gets points on the ground, which – when you can get that late in the draft, it's very valuable, even if it's just 1 year. He's obviously not promised anything beyond this season or even to the end of the season, but if he plays well, they're not going to be in a position to replace him in the draft next year. If he plays well enough to get them 9 or 10 wins, which might be a bit of a long shot, but they've got skill players. They got one of the deepest wide receiver rooms in the league that doesn't really get talked about. And he just to get that Konami potential that late is valuable. It's going to take a few positive camp reports, which we're already seeing trickle out a little bit. And then all he's got to do is, one big scramble in a preseason game, and you're going to see him jump a couple of rounds, I think, in startups as we get closer to the season, especially Superflex league. I primarily play Superflex, so that's what I'm looking at this through a Superflex lens.
Yeah, 1QB is like a totally different ball game because it's so different. But there's a guy who's going very close to him in ADP, and it's a similar situation. It's Desmond Ridder. Yep. What separates Howell from Ridder for you? Because it's like a very similar bet you'd be making on both those guys.
I just haven't seen the same public sentiment that Ridder might not be the starter. Everyone seems to have accepted that, but I see mainstream fantasy content creators, websites, everything talking about Brissett like Brissett's going to be the starter, and we've heard nothing but the opposite from the team, from the coaches, from the GMs. Players in practice are praising Howell, and I just think he hasn't got the benefit of the doubt that Ridder got. Maybe it's because Ridder started a couple of extra games last season. I don't know, but you're right. I see those two very similarly.
Yeah, I think they both have the case you can make where they have very good skill players around them. Like Howell's got the really good wide receivers. Ridder has very good wide receivers too. And it's more you're just making a bet on, Eric Bieniemy or everybody we hate, like Arthur Smith, my least favorite guy, but he actually runs an efficient offense. It's just
he does.
It's such a cluster, for fantasy. So so there's give and take with both those guys. But I think that's a very those two are a good dichotomy bet to see if you want to take your bet, because Howell's a little bit cheaper. So if you want to take a little bit more value, Howell's the guy you would give it.
Definitely, and that's why I think there's more room for him to grow in the ADP. More room to move up.
Yeah, and I think Howell reminds me a little bit of Daniel Jones, where he's got that supporting cast. He does have the legs to get that first down if everything falls apart. And you're right. I think the offensive coach and skill players, he should outperform his QB 32 easily.
Yeah,
so
easily.
If you're in the back end of the first round and you go wide receiver heavy, Sam Howell is a great pick in the 11th round. I would actually even go ahead and pick him in the 10th round. Same with Desmond Ridder. I would have those two as my QB2s.
And it obviously makes sense if you're drafting to win now, but I would say even if you're trading back in the startup and accumulating future draft capital, guys like this will gain value as we're in season and they're getting those starts and they're putting up the points. No one says you have to keep them for multiple years. You pick a guy, I'm not sure what round he's going in now off the top of my head, but it's down there.
And Howell's the 11th, Ritter's the 10th.
There you go. So you're picking a guy in the 11th round. Maybe you can't get a first for him, but I'd argue you might be able to if there's someone contending that's QB needy in season. They might be willing to give you that first, and it might just be a late first next year, but that's currency. You don't even have to make the pick; it's currency.
Right. We saw people trading seconds for Mike White last year because they were so desperate in season trying to win because of the disaster that was certain QB rooms. So he can definitely gain value as long as he's semi-productive. That's the only thing you need to worry about. As long as he doesn't get benched, you'll be fine. You'll get points. So 100%.
Exactly. And I talk about his rushing. He's obviously not a Lamar Jackson, not a Josh Allen, but he's a guy who can move. He's shown it. He's got the college production on the ground. He flashed it a little last year when he started the one game against Dallas. He ran one in. So I definitely think he's going to be a riser.
I think that was a great point, right? You're talking about him increasing in value in season, and our other topic is finance, and QBs are assets, especially in SF leagues. So a starting QB going in the 11th round, that's easily going to be up to a 24 late first, which is usually around the 6th, 7th round in startup. So you're essentially gaining 5 rounds of profit there. So I think this is a really, really good call. And everything's perfectly staged for Sam Howell to perform. Now it's just on him to execute.
100%.
Chris Godwin, I am so happy you put him up here.
All right, I thought I might get pushback on this with all these Tampa Bay quarterback camp videos coming out. They can't hit anybody wide open and sweat in shorts, but But no, I think obviously he had a down year last year coming off the injury. We should expect him to be back full health this year. They also have the situation where the starter. I mean, we can assume it'll be Baker. Maybe that's not a good thing. I don't know, but I think the uncertainty at quarterback is bringing down the whole team, all the fantasy players on that team. So once that's locked in, people see him through the course of the summer. He's back to himself. I'm sure we're going to get Chris Godwin 100% healthy reports for months now. And then another reason I'm kind of going on a limb here. This is the only one where, I'm going on a hunch and a what if, but I could really see Mike Evans getting moved before the season. I think it's a big possibility. I know the team hasn't come out and said that, and I'm not usually I don't base my dynasty decisions on speculation, but the way they're building their team, they're clearly not trying to win games this year. It's pretty obvious. Regardless what they say, you watch where they spend their money and what they're doing with the roster. They're not coming out here trying to compete in 2023. This is a tank year. This is a rebuild year. And while Godwin he's younger, he's got more years on his contract. I don't think he'd be the guy to be moved, especially if they're hoping to draft a quarterback next year. I could see Evans maybe early preseason or late training camp definitely swirling with the trade rumors. And that obviously will bump Chris Godwin up because the volume will be through the roof.
Yeah, I mean, if Evans gets traded, I think Godwin does. I think it's a pro and a con, right? Because it takes away that legit outside receiver, so then defenses can concentrate on Godwin. But then it also increases his target share. I'll say this about the Tampa Bay quarterback room: we don't have a proven passer that can pass outside the numbers, and we've seen Baker have a tendency to take that, intermediate short route where Godwin excels in first and right off the bat. So I think it's going to be a similar situation to what Jarvis Landry was in Cleveland with Baker. And I think Godwin is going to provide that security blanket to Baker or Trask, who's going to be, new and learning the NFL ropes. I think Godwin's going to become that security blanket, that PPR monster. Definitely. So if this was full PPR, I think Godwin is at least around discounted.
Yeah.
He's really cheap. He's kind of in that weird age where he's 27, so he's going to be 28. So you're not going to get elite value for him anymore just because he's reaching that age cliff, right? But you're basically talking, he's wide receiver 29. Like, he's pretty devalued as it is. And with how Baker's very much limited quarterback, he's going to lock in on Godwin a lot, even with Evans. And if you look at Evans' splits, it's zone and man. He's very good against man, but zone coverage, like, that's not Evans' thing. And defenses are playing almost 70% zone now.
And that's where Godwin eats.
Yes, and that's where he's going to eat. So he's going to live underneath in a PPR. Like, it's a good investment. I wouldn't worry about it. If you want cheap contending points, Godwin is a solid route to go. Like, that's
exactly.
And
I'm not saying go out and trade firsts for him or anything like that. I just think he's a guy whose value will be going up in the coming months for sure.
Yeah, because they're just the community has just tanked on everyone Buccaneers. Like, they're just people just aren't touching them right now, and it makes sense because that you see the video of Baker missing freaking by like 5 feet. Like, it wasn't even
bad.
I was like, bad. Dude, just oh my gosh, he's so terrible.
I saw that video yesterday, and I was like, wait, are they posting the same one from last week? And nope, different video, same result.
Just a disaster.
It looks bad, man. It looks real bad.
It's literally like the Seahawks situation last year where people were just completely out on Lockett and DK. And I mean, I don't expect Baker to be as good as Geno, but if he's relatively close, like you get massive. That's a massive spike in value. So
yeah, definitely. I faded the crap out of Seattle last year to my own detriment in some leagues.
Everybody did.
Especially in
it was
best
just a
ball.
disaster. It was
Yeah.
sweet. I was like, they're gonna be awful. Oh, so wrong.
I did
So wrong.
I did one of the underdog super flex drafts last year and just fully faded quarterback. I went super late quarterback. I think I ended up with Lawrence and Geno and Daniel Jones, and I made it to the post. It was one of my only teams that advanced into the postseason of these tournaments, and I was like, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, I picked Geno off of waivers in 2 dynasty leagues and Superflex leagues last year. He was on waivers, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll pick him up because it's Drew Lock's the other guy, and he's god awful." So, what's the worst that could happen, right? I just dropped this guy. Yeah, so I got super lucky on that. But yeah, the value was insane on all those guys last year.
Yeah, I'm happy you made that parallel between this team and that Seattle team because it was the same thing. We didn't know who the starter was going to be, and the public was convinced that they were going to suck no matter what. Yep. And it just created insane values on those players.
Yeah, because there's still a decent amount of talent on both sides of the ball in Tampa Bay. Like it's not defunct talent. Like they can actually with Russell, that division they can still compete too.
Yeah, Russell Gage is not a fantasy stud by any means, but as an NFL wide receiver, he can make plays and move the chains, and that's really what they need. Yeah,
right. Exactly. They just need bodies.
Yeah, and I think comparing Baker to Geno is not the right move. I actually think Kyle Trask takes the starting position. Because don't do it.
All right.
They got to see what they have in him. But we've seen Baker in that.
Yeah, we know what Baker is. Yeah,
they're gonna give Baker a shot just because he's a former #1 overall pick. So he needs to prove that he sucks, and if he does, then they will happily turn to Trask because they're gonna try to
prove that in the first half of the first game.
the thing about Trask is he's free, so he doesn't cost you anything. So it's kind of the same bet as last year. It's just if it's a free quarterback in Superflex, just grab them. You know what I'm saying? It can't hurt you.
The one thing I'll say about the Tampa Bay is I think they've been passing at the league high the past 2 years. I think last year was an absurd 755, and I think that was Tom Brady's doing.
Yep.
Than anything. So I think that number definitely comes down. So
by a lot.
I think that's why one of the reasons that a lot of you see Evans and Godwin getting faded, but
that's fair.
Getting a team's wide receiver 1 in the 7th round,
right?
I think that's value.
Well, and also their line was decimated last year by injuries, and it's going to be a lot better than it was last year. So they can at least have time because Brady led the league in basically seconds to throw, per attempt, because he was just out of the pot immediately, and their offense was just dink and dunk. They couldn't do anything. So it's gonna likely be similar because Baker sucks, but they're going to at least be able to protect him a little bit longer. So he'll have more time to throw downfield, stuff like that. They can actually push it down a little bit, so it'll open it up somewhat.
Right, and then the other thing is I think they established the run, right, and then that opens up that play action. Whereas last year they had pretty much no one was fooled by a play action move at all.
No. You just have to be able to just fake it, and it should work. Yeah.
Right. All right. Here's my guy, Devin Singletary. I think he's very devalued. I mean, RB50. And everyone's assuming that Dameon Pierce is going to run away with the Houston Texans RB. But we all know that I would say almost 2/3 of the NFL is in running back by committee. And we've seen, Jamal Williams last year survive on that kind of role in the NFL offense. And I think Singletary is a very underrated running back. He fended off James Cook, who is electric, and posted really good high-end RB2 numbers at Buffalo with a limited touchdown upside that he had there with Josh Allen. And I think if you look at some of the deeper numbers, Dameon Pierce isn't that efficient either running the ball. So I think Singletary is going to command close to 50, if not more than 50% of those touches at the running back position in the Houston Texans that will likely want to establish the run to take pressure off their young QB. So I think you're getting a high-end RB2 in the 15th round. He's a perfect 0 RB candidate.
Yeah, at the very least, he's a high-end handcuff. He'll be a part-time player, I think. I don't know if I'm quite buying in that he'll get 50% of the touches, but he is a veteran and he's done it before. I don't know that he'll get the goal line work, but he's probably more of a pass catcher than Dameon Pierce is. And Pierce was inconsistent. He was a little boom bust. And we know that the coaches coming from the San Francisco system, they're not trying to just feed one guy. It's going to be a split. It's going to be at worst 60-40. And to get somebody who can come in and be the lead back if anything happened to Pierce, I mean, yeah, it's an incredible value where he's going right now.
Yeah, there's like it's not quite 10 rounds of difference, but you're really like that's the difference between the two players. So yeah. Pierce is a 5th round pick. Singletary's pushing like 15, 16 rounds. So like that's massive difference. And if you just want a piece of this backfield, which everybody expects the Texans to suck, and for good reason, like they're still lacking a lot of talent and things of that nature, you just buy into a situation for really cheap. And if it breaks into your favor, which theoretically it could with Singletary, that's how you gain significant value with him. So, like, it's just a bet on the situation where we've seen Singletary. He's been able to carve out a role throughout the years. It was Frank Gore before that. And that was James Cook. And they've had other guys there where, like, Singletary's commanded a portion of that offense no matter what. He's going to be involved at the worst case. Like, he's going to play a role. So he's going to be involved. And if, like, that's the worst case you get, then you get a handcuff and an injury happens. Then that's how you get the value. Or if he, like, steps in and gets more work than we expect, there's value there. So there's really multiple outs for Singletary, more than there are for Pierce at his cost. So,
and if he comes in as the 3rd down back, being the veteran trusted more in pass protection, and Houston's defense is still horrible, he stands to see volume in garbage time too. Just dink and dunk, catching passes in the flat, trying to play catch up in these games. So I like the pick here.
The weird thing with Singletary is he had like the worst receiving PFF grade last year, like the worst. It didn't even matter. He still had a higher target share and more targets than like James Cook. Like I don't know why people are fascinated with him in like the receiving game, but he still gets work. So like it's hard to argue. Even if he's inefficient, it doesn't matter. He's still able to carve out that work. So like
I'm not even
run routes, stuff like that.
I'm not even making the point that he's good there, but he just might be more trusted in that position than Pierce is.
Yep. I think it goes back to that pass blocking capability. That's why they put him in that situation. And if I'm picking a running back, I'm picking the one that can pass block because they'll be in more snaps and more plays.
Yeah. Right. And
high value touches.
They could be down a lot this year, right? Because their defense is still trash. Yeah. So hi, easy. Sorry, that's my daughter.
Good cameo.
Yeah, right. Here, I'll be back in 1 second.
All right. I mean, I think this was sort of how Ty, yours and I discussed and kind of spread out was I think there's David Montgomery, AJ Dillon, and Devin Singletary, which are like really good. Especially in best ball, really good 0 RB.
That's picks. Ideal. So you don't have to know when to start them.
Right. Exactly. I think that's one thing that's a lot of people don't differentiate in their mind is in best ball, you don't have to worry about when they go off. So having the boom or bust players helps, but a lot of times in like dynasty or redraft, people forget, and the reason I don't like 0 RB in redraft is you can never predict on a week-to-week basis who's going to go off.
You need to have injuries happen for that to pay off well in redraft for sure.
Right.
Yeah. And why I like Singletary and these types as those 0 RB targets, especially in best ball, because in best ball you want guys who can hit your lineup regardless of injury in front of them. Like he's not just a handcuff. He's going to be getting some level of play. So he can, fall into an end zone on a random week, or, he's not just a pure, like in the past, Alexander Madison. If Cook was healthy, Madison wasn't seeing your lineup, something like that. But this is a different situation where he's at least already a part-time player with the potential to grow from there. So
right. I think that's a really good point. All right, J.K. Dobbins, another player I like. Thanks, Jesse.
You're welcome.
Is that your homer bias though? Or?
Very biased.
Yeah. Prue's a big Ravens fan. It's funny. We're in a best ball draft right now, and there's like a couple Ravens fans, so everybody started trolling by putting Ravens photos up as their little sleeper image. So there was like 6 Ravens images up, and everybody's like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "I don't know, man. We just love the Ravens, I guess, out here." But yeah, it's really a simple bet with Dobbins. Like, he's a very talented back, and he's going behind Javonte, which I don't freaking understand. Like, we had this situation last year with Dobbins that Javonte is dealing with this year, and it's like, yeah, you know who I want ahead of J.K. Dobbins? I want Javonte, who's never carved out at all like this the significant portion of the workload. And I'm like, dude, what are we doing? I get it. Like, last year was rough with Dobbins, but I sold all my shares. I was like, listen, I'm out. I sold him for like Josh Jacobs in a second last year. I was like, dude, I don't want nothing to do with him. And
that paid off though.
That paid off immensely. And this year I'm trying to flip it where I'm trying to do Jacobs for Dobbins in a second. Like, that's how I'm trying to go about doing it. Like, flip the values, right? Because they're so insulated. But he's just a super talented back. He was my RB1 coming out, and that did not pay off very well for me because Mr. Jonathan Taylor has been the stud, and Dobbins has dealt with injuries. It hasn't been great, but like on a per touch basis, Dobbins has been one of the best running backs in the NFL. Like, last year, even though he was like peg legging his way to 100-yard games, he was top 10 yards per. Yeah, he was top 10 yards per touch, second in juke rate, third in breakaway one rate. It was like, he's a very good running back. He's still got 57% of the opportunity share. Like, that's pretty good. That's top 25. So what you're betting on is a healthy Dobbins this year. Ideally, the bullish case is they open up the passing more, and he actually gets a little bit more passing work because he has never seen any of that. Like last year, it was like a 5% target share. That's kind of whatever. But realistically, you're just betting on him to be super efficient, score a lot of touchdowns, get a lot of rushing yards. And at RB19 in Dynasty in the 6th round, it's like, there's the only way he doesn't gain value, in my opinion, is if he gets hurt again. Like, that's the only way you lose money on this bet because he's still young. He's not old. He's got a couple years on his contract. It's a fairly easy bet to make if you want to wait and grab your like later RB1 down there just because of how good he is. And like, that's really just the case for him. So I'm all backing on Dobbins. I've always loved the talent. And now that he's back healthy, I know Prue's fully on board. So I'm on board as well too with J.K. Dobbins.
Yeah. He falls into that bucket with the injury discount and people not fully appreciating the volume he's going to get. I mean, yeah, he's going to be good. And so I have a question. What do you think is going to happen with him? I think he's on the last year of his rookie deal. You think he gets tagged next year?
Theoretically, yeah, like the Ravens are a smart organization. They're kind of doing some weird stuff. They gave OBJ a ton of money, which I don't what the heck.
Heavily incentive based.
Yeah, heavily. It's still got a lot of money though. Like it's up front, it's cash, and I was like, what the heck? So
I think that OBJ signing was outlier because of Lamar Jackson.
Right, like he pushed it, and because like Hopkins isn't even going to get that money, and he's actually healthy. But that's a whole other situation with the Ravens. But I would say worst case he gets tagged, or he hits free agent market, and then he gets like a multi-year deal where he's getting like $10 to $12 million a deal, which it's not bad money. He's not going to get like breaking money just because he's not going to be in the cap or anything like that, right? Where he's not going to be that type of weapon. But
just the way the running back market is moving,
exactly.
It's not going to happen. But
like it's kind of like the running back market's in a very weird place right now, where you have old producers. They're kind of just slowly trickling their way out, and then you have these young guys coming up. So it's kind of a weird situation, honestly.
It's definitely a transition phase. I could see him getting a David Montgomery type contract. If
for sure
the Ravens don't tag him next year, but
like that, I'd say that's probably like lower end of what he could get, just because like Montgomery got like $6 million a year, and
something like that.
Yeah, like Montgomery is good at a lot of stuff, but he's not really great at anything. Where like Dobbins is actually like he has difference making traits, and teams love that. Like that's why he went early second round. Like the Ravens saw something in him, so I think teams will be wanting to pay a little bit more money for him. But it's. With these running backs, it's not a long-term investment. And even like the exception of like Bijan and Gibbs, just because they're rookies, those are at least 3 to 4 year investments. Outside of that, where you have guys who are pushing off of their rookie deals, it's like a 1 to 2 year investment with rookies.
Absolutely,
or dynasty. So it's just short term. Think about it. If he starts hitting in the middle of the season, you can easily flip him for much higher costs, or you can upgrade, or you can get multiple firsts, things like that. So at this cost. Yeah, I'm all in on Dobbins at this cost.
Love it.
So So this is why Jesse's on this podcast, right? He understands trading and whatnot, and in the finance world, right? If you really understand how much cash flow a business has or how the stock market works, what Jesse did with Dobbins, selling him off for Jacobs in a second and now flipping back to Jacobs is called option trading, and Jesse is really good at that in the dynasty fantasy football world. And I think he's really good at what I call is the analogy to option trading is this short-term trading, understanding that this stock or player is going to lose value in the next 12 months, and you bet on that, and then you flip yourself around once it loses that value. You say, okay, now it's going to start gaining value. So I think Jesse, you need to start doing some YouTube shorts on fantasy football option trading.
Yeah, for real. Like that makes a lot more sense. Actual, so fantasy football makes so much more sense in my head than actual financial money, where I get into that. And I'm like, yeah, I just don't fully understand it. But the dynasty aspect of fantasy football just clicks in my head where it's so much easier for me to understand. I'm like, oh yeah, this guy's going to tank, like sell him. This guy, he's going to ride. Like, it's just, for some reason, it just works easier in my brain.
Yeah.
That's just,
if we could apply these to business, we wouldn't be.
This is why we have Proof.
Fantasy.
Proof is the genius in business. So yes,
we need to start tagging like players with stocks, right? Okay, Dobbins is the Tesla, and well, Tesla would be Chase, or Jefferson.
Yeah. Dobbins is just like a nice, like he's Audi. He's like nice higher end. It's not the peak, but like it's a very good car. You know what I'm saying? Like that's Dobbins. Right. But they do actually have those sites you can use where you bet on players as stocks, which are actually pretty interesting. And I think that is a fun thing to kind of dive into at a later time. But yeah, that stuff is kind of fun.
Yeah.
Nice. Now we go on to our bonus pick, Jaden Reed.
Love this.
So Jaden Reed, this is a double digit. Like we're pushing value out like to the 10th plus rounds. Why I chose Reed is a pretty straightforward case. He can play all over the field. The Packers wide receiver room sucks. Like I love Christian Watson, but outside of that, like freaking dub, like he's
gadgety.
Yeah, like Reed's gonna step in, play the slot, and they've already talked about it. He's going to be on the field playing the slot day one. Jordan Love needs someone in the middle of the field because we have no idea if Jordan Love is good. So guess what? He's going to turn into a security blanket for him, and he's going to be running those routes, which are very beneficial. And like that's where you gain volume from, the easy routes, which helps someone out like Jordan Love, who's a developmental quarterback. Guess what? It's like that. And you're betting on him in like the round. I don't know why he's like tanking in value. It doesn't make any sense to me. But round 14, which is absurd compared to what he was a couple weeks ago. Yeah, that's just a super case. It's really easy to see him gaining value and just moving up from to round 10 at a minimum, right? If he has one breakout game, just skyrocket. And that's all you need to see from these guys. And he's been rookie drafts. He's like been a late second, which I don't know why people are still devaluing him.
I got him in a third of a rookie draft.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like he's so cheap. And he had the earliest breakout of any wide receiver in this class. Like that's what people don't understand. He broke out early. He broke out like 18 in like 3 months. Like he broke out immediately. And like that's what we want to chase with rookies. So yeah. Like he's gonna be a security blanket for him, yeah, for sure.
I'm super high on Reed, and you make a good point with Jordan Love. An inexperienced quarterback's best friend is somebody who can get open fast, and that's exactly what Jaden Reed will do. Like you say, he's going to be in the slot right away, but he's a guy who can play on the outside too and get open. To me, he's like a Deontay Johnson clone. In college, he played all over the formation at both schools he was at. He's returning punts. He's versatile. He's going to be on the field. He's going to earn his way on the field because, I mean, Watson is a fun player. He's big. You know, he provides those explosive plays, but down to down, he's not a refined, reliable wide receiver. And Dobbs is a good story. He'll definitely still be in the rotation. I don't think he's not just gonna vanish, but
no.
Reed is a better player. And sometimes I gotta pump my brakes on him because I'm a little too high, but I love this guy, and especially a lot of it has to do with the cost. He's so cheap, in rookie drafts. He's cheap in startups. He's probably the best value on like underdog best ball drafts right now because he's
super cheap in those.
He's gonna get volume, man. He's gonna be on the field and he's gonna get volume. Even if Jordan Love is not good, he's gonna lean on Jaden Reed.
Right? At this cost, it doesn't matter if the quarterback's bad because you're getting cheap volume. And the thing with like Reed, if he won't start out on 2 wide receiver sets just because there's going to do a lot of run plays and they need somebody to block. And Dubs is a better blocker than Reed. But like even Matt Hartman was saying, he would not be shocked if Jaden Reed was the wide receiver 1 in this offense just because of how good of a route runner he is. So there is a path where he is a wide receiver 1. I don't think it's the likeliest path just because Christian Watson's a freak athlete and like the upside case with him is just astronomical. But like Reed's a safe bet where he has like decent upside attached to him as well. So best case scenario, Reed gets on the field early. He earns the trust of the coaching staff. Then he's playing in 2 wide receiver sets as well. And then that's where he gets all targets. Like there's a good case to be made for Jaden Reed to buy at his cost for everywhere.
Definitely. Yeah. I'm glad you brought up Harmon too, because Reed looked good in reception perception.
Yeah, Harmon's great. Like I love Matt Harmon. He's awesome.
He also popped up in he looked really good in JJ Zacharysen's model, his prospect model. So I mean, those are 2 guys that I will lean on for, JJ is really good on the analytics side, and it's not just the cookie cutter breakout age plus this and blah blah blah. Like he refines his model and tweaks it every year. So it's something that I will, it's a data point for me when I'm evaluating guys coming out. And both of those guys called out Jaden Reed as somebody they were targeting, and I listen up when they speak about stuff like that.
Yeah, and he was the wide receiver who dominated the Senior Bowl. Like I know people are talking about Mingo, but like Reed was dusting the cornerbacks in coverage. Like he was that's where he got onto my radar as a Senior Bowl. Once they were talking about, like people were raving about him. I was like, all right, who is Jaden Reed? And then you hear smart people like you're mentioning, where it's like Matt Harmon and JJ Zacharysen. You're like, all right, obviously it's all coming together where it's like people are using what they see on the field, and then analytics is backing it up. Like I have a hard time like arguing with that. And you dig into it, and you're like, the one thing where he had a problem is where he had to transition to the outside, but that was like 2 years at Michigan State where it took him a while. Yeah. But he finally got comfortable playing that, and now he can play all over the field. So like,
and that is an incredibly boring Big Ten offense.
Yes. Not quite like Iowa where it's just like
not that bad, but
watching paint dry bad. But it was not a fun offense for sure. No.
So I mean, I think what's interesting is like you look at this a couple of weeks ago, he's going in the 12th round, the beginning of 12th round, and then all of a sudden you see this spike downwards to the mid 14 round, and I'm like, I don't even understand that. That's just adding value to Reed's case at that point.
I didn't even see that until we started doing this podcast, and I was like, wait, what? He's dropping 14th round? I don't know what's happening here. I was like, okay, it's even better value.
Smash pick every time if I'm there.
Right, exactly. He's like Jalen Tolbert last year, but he's actually good at football. So you know what I mean? People are making the case for him. Yeah, same thing.
All right. So here's sort of my financial spin on it. I think what we just did was an exercise in stock valuation called intrinsic value. And one of the best people at stock intrinsic value is Warren Buffett. I mean, he is gold. He picked up Coca-Cola, Apple, all of those way before anyone was on board. And it's this way of actually looking at a business, looking at its cash flow, understanding its mission and understanding its CEO and how it's going to forecast out. And if you believe in it, then you evaluate their current stock price. And if you see a positive growth in their stock price, you buy them. If you see a negative growth in their stock price, you fade them. So I think, similar to that, we just kind of did that. We looked at, 5-6 players whose ADPs we think are valued at a very low price compared to what we think it's going to happen in the future. So, I like we've said all along in this podcast, fantasy football and your finances in the stock market, they're identical. A lot of people don't realize that, fantasy football was created by someone that was very good within the stock market. And he had the idea of, creating a fantasy football game, and it kind of derived from the stock market. So it's a lot of similarities like we've discussed. I think it's a lot easier to talk about fantasy football players than it is, company cash flows and whatnot. But if you peel the onions, it's a lot of the same practices.
Yeah, there's like the crossover between them. Like it might not click for everybody once you start diving into it. And you look at like when people say it's like a stock market, it literally is. Like that's what dynasty is. You treat players such as assets, and this is what we're doing right here, where we expect them to rise, or we can do it on the flip side where we expect them to fall, right? And we can pick like 5 or 6 guys that would just completely tank. So yeah, it's 100%. Like there is a very much a crossover between the two.
That's why the dynasty calendar is important too. Certain times of years, veterans are more valuable. There's the swing in value of draft picks, rookie draft picks. Right now is the best time to buy future rookie draft picks because everyone wants to build their team for the upcoming season. And those picks are only going to increase in value from here. So I love to, if I have a team that's a little stacked at a position, I will try to thin out my depth to try to stack on some future capital while it's cheap now, because besides just being an excellent trade chip, that the value of that pick is going to go up more than most players on your roster.
Yeah, players aren't guaranteed to rise in value. Future draft picks are guaranteed to rise in value. And like particularly not even 2024, 2025 picks. Like if you push it out further, you get more value gains. So
and you can get them
further you want to push out. Yes, exactly. That's the thing. Like they're devalued. You can go to like Keep Trade Cut right now. Look at 2025 first compared to 2024 first. It's significantly lower. We move forward a year later, it's going to keep rising, and like it's free money basically is what draft picks are. Like they're free money.
Yeah.
Sure. So that were our group of players that we think are very undervalued at the current moment, and like anything in fantasy that could change in a month, depending on some hype videos and whatnot from training camp and OTAs. But I think that was a great group of people and a great discussion. Ty, we appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And I think, you brought up some really great points on each of the players. Maybe we could have you back on when, we get closer to the redraft.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. Be great.
You want to tell us where people could find you at?
I'm Resist the Tilt on Twitter. I'm not a content creator or nothing like that. Just an avid gamer. I'm in the Twitter streets mostly either just to gather information or, retweet some relevant thing that I might want to come back to, or sometimes I try to get a little dialogue going, ask some questions, whatever. I'll post a poll here and there, but I'm not, follow me or don't. I don't care really.
Sometimes it's the non-analysts that do the best because they love the game, they understand the game, but they're not overthinking it.
Right. Absolutely.
So I'm gonna have to place this disclaimer because we did talk a little bit about finance, so I do not want to get sued.
Please note that the information provided in this podcast is for educational, entertainment, and informational purposes only. It should not be considered as financial advice, and we strongly recommend that you consult with a licensed financial advisor or professional before making any financial decisions based on the information provided in this podcast.
I wish you posted that earlier. I just bought like 5 stocks while we were on here.
I always forget about that, and Prew's like, we got to post it. I'm like, oh, yeah. Like, 100%, we definitely got to post that.
Well, it was a great conversation, and look forward to future talks and future more best ball leagues with you, Ty.
Oh yeah, definitely. You'll be on top of my invite list for sure. Jesse, nice. I'll have to get you in something too if I get another one going.
Let me know.
All right, appreciate it, guys. Have a good one.
Take care, man.
Thanks, Ty.
This podcast is sponsored by The League Winners. Check them out at theleaguewinners.com.